really bring this community together with the people who really matter, and that's this industry. And I'm a Simperit. I've been at ONF for about 10 months. This is my first open source event, to be very frank, okay? So I've always been in very, typical industry events, and I was really looking forward to this because I thought this would be a place where I will have people not of my age group, people much younger. It'll be a lot more fun, a lot more exciting. Everyone is ready to collaborate, everyone is open, everyone is, jumping up and down. So hope we can bring that energy down and not let me down. I know the panelists here are going to do their best, but I'm also counting on you. Okay. Let me get my clicker somewhere. Thank you. This works. Okay, so to kick off the panel, and before I introduce the panelists, I wanted to revisit what are we all about again. Why is ONF? What are we doing? What the community is trying to do? And you saw this on the first day when Guru presented ONF. And I wanted to highlight a few things. So we are about transforming networks. That's a big part of our ask. We are out there to transform networks, not because it's technologically cool, but we really want to enable new service delivery. And that basically means when you enable new service delivery, it has to make money for someone who delivers it, aka service providers, our primary partners. And then the third part of it is to catalyze the industry to accomplish this transformation. And this is also important. So if you see, I skipped the part which is written down in big letters behind me called build. And I'm not saying build is not important. What I'm saying is building is necessary, but not sufficient to meet our mission, okay? And that is the key message I want to bring in this industry panel, and I'm hoping the panelists will give their support to that. So that is the way we look at transformation at ONF. And I want to draw a quick parallel to kind of really understand how that transformation works. So many of you, not many of you, some of you, many of your parents organized themselves this way 20 years ago. Okay, we had a desk phone, maybe it was wireless, but tethered to the wire line. We had an organizer and a laptop, and that was how we organized our life. And see the transformation which has happened literally in the last 15 to 20 years. So what I want to really talk about is the measure of transformation is the adoption of that technology or that new innovation. So the first step which happened in that journey to that transformation where we are today is, some of you might not remember, but these are Casio digital diaries or digital phone books. So instead of writing down phone numbers in little diaries, we used to write and create little digital things and put it in our pocket, and we thought this was very cool. The next step, Palm Pilot. Some of you might have used it also. Am I coming in your way? Can you not see the screen? Can you see the screen? Is that what you're trying to say? I'm sorry, I thought you were saying something to me. So, second step in the journey was Palm Pilot, and the adoption of Palm Pilot was maybe a few X more than the first one. Third came a BlackBerry, which now allowed us to talk, organize, read email for the first time on our device. And if now, obviously, all of us cannot live without our favorite phone. And Mr. Sampson, I put you on the top.
Thank you.
I know where I'm standing. So this is the journey, and I think I want to parallel this with where we are on the SDN, and remember that this took 20 years, right? So this took 20 years. It is important to calibrate where we are with SDN. SDN is about 5 to 6 years old, and Cord and ONOS even younger. So when we start talking about adoption, we need to be really careful about calibrating that time scale and say industry doesn't move that fast. And this is the consumer industry. Service provider industry, no offense, is even slower to adopt new technologies. It takes multiple months and years of testing and retesting and calibrating before new technology is adopted. So as long as we can enable paths to production, paths to deployment, path to adoption, we should feel very happy today. But the real adoption, the real kind of personalization, programmable networking is still 5 to 10 years away. And only the panelists here can tell you how it's going to work out. Make sense? So this is kind of the metaphor of transformation. I want to make sure that everyone is clear on it. So bringing it back to our industry. So what is our value chain? When you look at industry value chain, we are this organization, open source organization, non-profit. We get funded by operators, vendors, system integrators, and we absorb research from academia, smart people come in and contribute, individual contributors. We create this open source platform and what we call solutions, but they are really reference implementations. By no means we should be, ONF's output should be construed as products ready for deployment. Okay, that is very, very clear, and we should not have any doubts that we are doing that. So the next step in that value chain is commercial vendors. Someone has to take the platform, build solutions around it, productize it, industrialize it, and then support it so that the eventual user, the service providers, can get the most value out of them. Okay, so this is the real value chain we are trying to enable, and today we have representation from obviously the ONF side, which is all of us in the audience and me, and then my distinguished panelists on the floor here who represent both the service provider side, KT and SKT, and Samsung and Huawei as two very typical vendors who service that industry. So we are going to have a great panel. This was just to set the context, and then the way we are going to do it is I'm going to have a few prepared questions which I have asked the panel to think about so that they have some thoughts. We're going to pose each question, have each panelist take a couple of minutes to answer that. Again, because we are this open, young thing, if you like the question, clap. If you don't like it, don't clap. If you like the answer, clap. If you don't like the answer, don't clap. That's how we are going to give some feedback, okay? All right, so this is audience participation is required and necessary, otherwise you're not going to get lunch. I said, don't leave, we'll close the doors. Okay, so we're going to get started. Panelists, thank you very much again for being here and appreciate your time. I suppose, are we ready? Okay. So the first question, if you can go around, if you are a service provider, what are the primary use cases for SDN and FV which you are evaluating or adopting in the near future? And if you're a vendor, what are your customers trying to evaluate? So you'll start from the right and go this way.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. The audience line.
Okay. So areas and use cases for SDN and FV, there are plenty of use cases. So one is in the data center to make VMs and containers to talk to each other. So that is one. For telco NFV, so also for NFVs, I mean we have LB as a service, firewall as a service type of stuff. I mean the traditional ones, but I mean now try to make it as a service, so make it easier to manage and scale and things like that. We also, I think our network division has been working on and deployed, I think it's Samsung's VNFs for virtual EPC and virtual IMS type of stuff for small scale. but it's not just in the lab, it's actually running and working. So yeah, those are the use cases. And okay.
That's good.
Yeah, applause, but no laughter.
Yeah, he mentioned Samsung.
Thank you. So I'm more like focused.
I'm sorry, I didn't get, if everyone knows, I suppose everyone, but if you can introduce yourself the first time, that way people know.
Certainly. My name is Aiwa Go, and I came from, I'm from Huawei. I'm responsible for the North American Transport SDN team, delivering transport SDN solutions, open source ecosystem environment.
If you don't know. So,
Yeah, Kang Lee from SK Telecom. The name of the slide was not correct.
correct. What happened? Sorry.
Okay, so from my view, I'm actually more focused in R&D of real products and be really hands-on on the coding part and delivering solutions which gets built from concepts into realization. So from my view, I would say the use cases of SDN and NFV solution, it's pretty much everywhere, right? From data center, campus network, all the way to metro and WAN networking, from SDN controller, virtualized VNF virtual functions to our customers adopting a microservice-based SDN controller in place of traditional network management system. It's being adopted, and we see a great momentum on getting this rolled out, especially from Huawei's perspective, the product side.
I'm Young from KT, and I'm working on NFV and SDN and cloud. And for our KTs, first adoption of this new technology is our own users as well as our enterprise customers. So we are now extend our use cases to the personal customers, and you may know the next January and February there will be a big event, Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. So now we are ready to adapt our new solution for that event.
Hi, my name is Soyoung Chung. I'm VP of Engineering at Samsung Electronics. Mainly responsible for NFV and infrastructure development. So what are the primary areas or use cases? I think it comes down to one goal, which is automation. Our use case is data center. It's an NFV pod, which brings the NFV automation, data center automation, and also other use cases, end-to-end, the 5G network slicing automation. So if I need to say just one thing, it's end-to-end automation is the goal of the NFV.
Thank you. Okay. So, question number 2 is, we start out, let me use the mic, sorry. We start out in a kind of a top level view, and then we'll get deeper and closer to obviously ONOS code and places like that. So the question number 2 for the panel is, describe your company's involvement with open source SDN and NFV, especially with ONF projects and solutions, and what do you expect to derive from this? So what do you expect as a corporation to get out of this activities?
So keep the
Same
music
order.
on there?
You decide. Okay?
Yeah.
So you start.
Yeah. So as I explained it, days ago, right, we're involved in various open source projects. ONOS is mainly, one thing, Core, OpenStack, ON.Lab, and with the value that we get from this activity is our product, right, NFVSD and the platform product is based on about 80% of the code base is based on the open source, right? Without the open source, the velocity that we can introduce the feature sets, introduce the products, introduce the end-to-end solutions, it's not going to be the same as what we can do it right now, right? So open source is a very big part of it, and our participation in the past, Samsung traditionally, participation in the open source has been fairly limited, just to be frank. But our intention going forward is that we're going to increase that participation. We are going to not only be a consumer of the open source code base, we are also going to be the contributor of the open source code base.
But wouldn't you say that you are maybe one of the biggest consumers of open source with your consumption of Android?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the overall Samsung electronics, yes, because Android is part of it. But even if you look at the just network business unit, which is where I'm from, right, the amount of open source that we consume is substantial. In many cases that people don't even realize that they're consuming the open source. For example, Linux, people just use it Linux. They don't even think about that it is open source, right? So when I said that we have a code base at 80+% is open source, that is not even counting Linux. Okay. So if you count the Linux, it goes much higher.
Thank you.
Well, for this activity, open source activities, we want to make our infras open by software. And when we want to open, we want to make it, we want to combine each components, each functionalities as much as so that we can provide to our customers what they want. So in that case, it is very important to integrate each component together, and it must be operable as well. And so it is important in these open source activities, we want to make sure that they are interoperable and they can be integrated well, and interfaces are well operated. Yeah, that's what we expect to this open source community.
So, and can you specifically talk about the ONF projects and what you want to get out of them from this community? From the ONF community or the ONOS community?
From here, so I want to, each organizations and each companies contribute their own open source. And we want to make sure that those open sources integrated well and they work together. So in ONF and in ONOS community, I want to test together to show that those components are integrated well and operated well.
Okay, so I'm from Huawei, and actually Huawei is a big player in the open source community, and we have engaged and deeply involved in many open source projects from OpenStack, ON.Lab, ODL, and especially on the ONF and ONOS side. Huawei has been like a beginning member of ONF and also a deeply involved in many aspects of ONOS. And for me personally, I'm driving two projects in ONOS. One is the ACTN, the other is the Dynamic Configuration Brigade. From Huawei as a company perspective, it truly believes that participating in open source community, bringing a healthy open environment will greatly foster innovations and help to find out very interesting solutions and that can satisfy our customers' needs. And the value of open source, there are several aspects. Right? First is with open source contribution. Basically, open source contribution is bilateral, meaning that while we contribute into open source community, into open source projects, and also on the other side, we also benefit from making use of open source solutions and open source projects, and we'll take whatever value, whatever part we believe appropriate, and put it into productize the solution which satisfies our use case. And on the other side, with open source projects, one can actually help with the factual standardization of many industry standards. For example, the ACTM project that I was driving actually greatly helped push the models being standardized in IETF and has created a great reference implementation, which makes the standards in a much better position to meet the real demand. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are involved with lots of open source projects. ONOS, one, Cord, M-Cord, we started with AT&T. Actually, I personally started the project. We are also involved with lots of open source foundations and the projects, OPNFP, and of course OpenStack, lots of big data related projects. So we were not like that. I mean, SKT was not like that before. But I think the change has happened in the last 2-3 years. The realization is that, I mean, SKT works with the top vendors globally, right? Whoever has the best solution, we take them. For example, storage, we take EMC storage, and for servers, we take HP servers. So when I first came to SKT, I described it this way. I mean, if this was a taxi company, you guys only have Mercedes and BMWs. I mean, you don't have any Hondas or Toyotas in your fleet. So, so that was the way how SKT was operating. Now, open source is a completely the other way around, right? You build your own car versus buying Mercedes. But the reason why the transformation happened was that at one point we realized that actually the value that you get from open source projects and open source software is better. It's not because it's cheaper, only cheaper, or it's not because it's something that you can change, but it's the value. So I think what I would like to suggest or propose to this community is to think about the value, right? Think about what is the differentiating value that it's not. I think it's well known that it's not the feature, it's the value that that's important at the end of the day. Yeah, very good.
So I love that. I love that metaphor about buying a ready-made car from Mercedes or Toyota versus building your own.
Yeah.
And the value you see is, I want to be made clear that you can go and then get the best innovation. So if you don't like the sound system which comes with the car from the manufacturer, you can go and upgrade it yourself, or get someone else to upgrade it, come in and help you get a better sound system, better transmission, whatever else you don't like. Is that what you're thinking?
So let me let me think about it, because I didn't really think in this direction.
Okay.
So within our company, there are different groups with different opinions about this. So there are definitely people. So if it's a matter of changing the sound system, I think, yeah, no one will care. Yeah, everyone will say that, okay, just bring it to a shop, some reputable mechanics, and they will do it. But if it's a matter of, say, okay, now, let's say I'm a cab company now, I need to compete with Uber, right? Then it's a totally different thing. Now I need to think about self-driving cars, right? And getting self-driving cars from, maybe we can wait and say Audi announced that, okay, it's a new A8 is a level 3 self-driving, so we can do that, or maybe we can try to look at some Chinese companies like Too Simple. They have L4 self-driving demo plan by end of the year. So now it's a very complex scenario, as you can imagine. Or, I mean, versus you can try to work many different component providers. I mean, you get LiDAR from somewhere, battery from somewhere, and algorithm from somewhere, GPU from somewhere, and then put together your own car. So there are all these different options. Suddenly, now you have many more options. And how do you choose from the best strategy? I think, well, yeah, I have my opinion, but I mean, there are people in the company who runs network, they have different opinions. So I don't know if that gives you an answer.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yon, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I can add to that. I think I probably didn't answer the second part of the question as well, so let me add to that. And I think, it's kind of interesting because we have two service providers here, two vendors. Vendors providing, giving an answer or response from the vendor perspective, and service providers giving a response from like consumer perspective, right? So let me, twist a little bit or change the angle a little bit, give an answer from the OpenSec or open source community perspective. I think, from Samsung, obviously expectation, the value that we expect to get is the productization. Productization of the technology that is available from the open source community and bring that together as a product or solution. But from the community perspective, I think that this is a very nice platform. It's an excellent platform to advance the technology, right? It starts out with a small group of people that just happens to work on something because that's what they needed. And they start sharing with other people, just as the OpenStack group, right? Sharing other people, and the pace of the progress from that point on, it can become exponential, right? So from the community perspective, I think that is the value that I think we need to look for.
Thank you. Anyone else wants to add before we go to the next question?
I have a follow-up question.
Oh, follow-up already. Please get to the mic. Thank you.
So I'm Shang-Ying from AT&T. I'm the product owner for the VOTA project. Just in case the distinguished guest will be leaving before the afternoon, so I'm asking my question now. My session will be in the afternoon. So the VOTA project is the VOT hardware extraction. We sort of regrouped that back in May timeframe to make it as an open project and invite different vendors and service providers to come to the project. So I'm formally invite the 4 distinguished guests to participate our VOT project. But one trend I've seen so far is most of the progress, at least on the access side, is on the 5G or more mobility-related product or the global SDN infrastructure-related work. What's your point of view on, especially for Korea, South Korea? I believe your fiber deployment probably one of the top among the world. So what's your position regarding to bring in SDN NFV to your fiber network? Doesn't matter whether it's a GPON or XGS-PON or EGP-PON. So I sincerely invite your participation, and I would like to see what's your view regarding to putting the SDN NFV on the wireline consumer spaces. And we have two major suppliers here on the stage also. I would like to hear your input.
So we'll start with KT and then go to suppliers. Is that okay, Sean?
That'd be great.
Okay. Yeah, KT, SKT, and then the suppliers.
Okay, for your question is for wireline part. And as you may know, and I think it is the same situation for the operators. And in wired area, there are so many legacy equipments, and the operators of those parts are very conservative. So, as Dr. Lee mentioned, there are several opinion groups in one company, and I share this situation with many operators, and especially the wired area, they are very conservative, and because the operators, their key performance index is no failure. So yes, that's very important for them, and they cannot sure this new technology is as safe as they want. Yeah. So here we approach them as not virtualization but automation. Yeah. So they get interested in this new technology, and we start from the automation and the other benefits for them. So in wired area, we deployed our transport testing. So we provide operation automation benefits for our operators, and we extend this technology all over the nationwide equipments of our inside KT's operation areas. And now we also deploy the NFV technology for our mobile areas first, and also we deploy our NFV technology to our customer premises area. And this area, they use combined wired and wireless technologies. So with these success cases, we will extend our wired areas operation, our NFVs too.
Thank you. Come on.
So on the optical network side, in the transport network, SKT is, I think, we have a plan to deploy NG-PON and then also apply transport SDN. I think transport SDN may have been already applied. I'm not the right person to give you the updated information, but that's what these guys have been looking at and working on.
I'm not directly involved with the wireline products or solutions. I'm mainly on the mobile side. But from the technology perspective, working in the mobile industry, I don't see much differences in whether it's a virtualization or SDN technology that being applied to the wireline versus mobile. I mean, it's already happening with some convergence, possibility of convergence on the wireline side and the wireless side, or mobile side access with the virtualized BNG, right? And so in terms of attraction, as to how much of the traction is happening in Korea in particular, I mean, that's something that rather defer to the two folks here from service provider side. But in terms of technology and in terms of interest and in terms of applications of the what's available and the ONOS, the code is the same code, whether it's a M code or R code or E code, right? So as a person that involved in this NFV SDN development and technology, I would certainly like to see the expansion of the overall NFV SDN deployment, not just as a lab trial, not just as a small-scale field trial, but as a mainstream deployment. And I think Korea actually has an opportunity to actually lead that progress, because it may come with the cultural differences. When Koreans start something, they actually tend to go in a large scale pretty quickly. The ramp-up time in Korea is very quick. So that's what I would like to see. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, so I guess I'm a little bit more involved in the wireline side because I'm doing transport SDN in this space, and so I would say on the optical transport and wireline transport side, because of the nature of the network, and the more you get close to the physical layer, the less the more difficult it becomes. Open and transformation into SDN is more challenging, right? But as far as I see from the transport SDN perspective, now people are starting to adopting the concept that even with a deep in from the optical layer above, it is possible to have to create to migrate from vendor proprietary solution into an open solution with open interface and centralized control with transport SDN controller. So that's what we are actively working for the transformation, and also this solution can help migrate many of the legacy networks with available different flavors of management and control platform into a integrated platform-based solution.
So I think I'm just making sure that he gets the answer he was asking. Does Huawei intend to participate in Volta as a project? Do you?
I am not directly involved in that, so I have to check back.
Just for you, Sean.
Yeah. But as I say, openness is always the part, and I pass it definitely.
Okay, thank you.
And so is Samsung, right? So on the broadband access domain, so again, I would like to welcome your participation. So.
Right.
Yeah, if you're referring to a mobile access, yeah, we can certainly discuss about it. But in the wireline side, at this point, we're not in that business or solution. But
makes sense. Yeah, that's why I didn't pick on him as much. Fair. Let's go on. I'm looking at the clock, which is behind the speaker. Okay, 20 minutes. Good. So now this is a question for you to ask the community. How can the ONF community, all of us here, help you deliver more value to your customers or to your organization? That's the question, and we'll start with SKT this time.
Well, I don't know. I think this is not the question for us. I think this is the question that ONF community should ask themselves, how to deliver more value to the service providers and the vendors.
So let me rephrase the question then to make it clear. What would be compelling thing if the ONF community were to deliver this to SKT or to KT? What would be the most compelling thing we can deliver in the short run to the mid run?
This is a very hard question, actually. This is a very hard question, and I think a lot of people here must be thinking about it every day. So I was also thinking, I mean, because this area is so big, and I don't have a direct answer, but I was just thinking, how can it become successful, right? Linux has been, and some of the other open source projects like Spark or Hadoop have been, and also like OCP have been, right? So, and many of these projects took a long time to get to the point where they can make impact. I think that's first. So it takes time and it takes a very focused effort. And one thing is that maybe they just pick just the one big problem and just to try to solve, just to follow through completely. And so I'm just trying to see what, so for example, Linux, right? I mean, Linux was, when I was doing graduate study in late 90s, it was still not very mature, right? There was no competition between Sun Solaris versus Linux, right? But now everything has changed. After 10, 20 years, everything has changed, and there are companies actually that can make substantial money out of that open source project, right? I mean, Red Hat, Mirantes, and all these Canonical. So I want to see this ONOS and core project to become like that, and the impact can be quite substantial in the sense that it's going to connect everything. Now, the thing is now, so what is the main differentiating value? That is the thing that we need to think very hard and just stick to it.
Fair.
Yeah.
So, at the risk of leading the witnesses here, I'm going to ask both to the service providers. The community also includes the vendors who are sitting here or the audience. So, what do you want from them? That's another way of looking at this question. The community is not only the developers and the ONF core platform team. What do you want from them? I'm just leading the audience, so maybe you want to answer those questions.
I want interoperability between multi-vendor solutions. So in open source community, there's also the same issues. So if each objects are well abstracted and they provide well-defined open interfaces, we can integrate as our customer ones, as the service ones, as the application ones. But if they are not interoperate well, we cannot provide anything. Yeah. So that's what I want to this community.
Very good.
I think this may be an easier question for vendors.
Yes.
It's always easier to try to sell it than, Yeah, I think this probably answers the upfront, depends on what part of the community that we're asking this question about. To a ONF the leadership community, what I would like to see is that we would like to have a more, I guess, opportunity presented, connecting between the consumer service providers and the vendors in terms of promoting the use cases, in terms of promoting the trial and promoting the post trial. And what would I like to request to the service provider side of the community? Certainly, we would like to see this use cases such as M-Core, R-Core, not just sitting in the lab, but actually get into the commercial deployment and increasing the footprint of the deployment. I think in Korea it's actually probably better. My personal opinion is that in terms of overall deployment status, but I think we still have a long way to go to become this SDN and FB to be a mainstream deployment. And adding one more to that, if I can add to the overall ONF community, the developers that's sitting in the crowd, my request is just to crank out the code as much as you can, right? And crank out the good code, not the buggy one.
Guys, come on. That's your call to action.
Yeah, so as a vendor, I heard a lot about interoperability testing. We take this input, and actually we are actively working on making all the products and solutions interoperable with commercial products and with the open source solutions. And what I think, like the ONF community and open source projects, especially in ONF, could help with is, and of course we, as open source contributor, would be part of that, making the goal happen, is so we should really consider the value of new initiative, new projects in the open source projects, and one is it should create a unique value, not just a replica of commercial solutions. Like say, okay, in some parts it's necessary, like protocols and stuff like that. It's necessary for those to exist in open source projects, right? But more over is we should create projects which has unique value that has advantage over commercial solutions, for example. And another thing that the community could help, or we could work together with the community, is to push those especially customer, to adopt open source solutions, to put it into lab trial, part testing, and those can actually prove that the open source actually creates value and address the needs for customer.
Interesting. I heard something and I want to make sure that I heard it right. You said that from the ONF community perspective, you as a vendor would like to see things which are unique, different than what is already being done today, and just not replicate that in a virtualized open sense. That's what I heard. So we think of this a little differently. We think of this, at least from the ONF leadership and the board perspective, we think of this as we are creating what we consider non-differentiated intellectual property, which is shared by all the users and consumers, and that's why it's called a platform. That's not differentiated by definition. 80% of what vendor X does and vendor Y does is very common and is non-differentiated. Where we really think that vendors can focus more and really differentiate and monetize their efforts is by creating that other 20-30% which is differentiated. So maybe you see what I'm trying to say, that we are thinking that we are in fact creating which is the stuff that you don't need to repeat again and again. You don't need to create a different way of automation. You don't need to create a different way of controlling a switch. You don't need to create a different way of controlling RRU and BBU. There's a standard interface which automatically works because it's standardized, it's interoperable by definition because it's written to XRAM, OpenFlow, what have you, right? But then Huawei's, Samsung's, Cisco's of the world can take that as a platform and build their VMFs and their services which scale, do amazing things for AR, VR, connected cars, all of those things, which are totally proprietary and which can be sold for billions of dollars. That's what you're thinking. But
I like your 80-20 thing.
you like the 80-20, good. Okay. Anyone in the audience wants to add to that? Because this is maybe a key difference which we think as a community and we preach the community to kind of think about versus what was just discussed. Okay. Yep. Go to the microphone, please.
Hello, I'm Juni from SKT also. As he mentioned, I'm from another network division R&D part. And also complement and answer to Sean's question. My team is developing TSDN platform based on OpenLab Live. And we are dealing with layer 0 to layer 3 or transport layer devices, try to adopt legacy devices into our own centralized manner. And like you said, we are also, another group in our team is also trying really hard to virtualization on customer wireline services. We can talk to each other later, yes. And in last year, in 2016, November, we participated in ONF OIF interoperability test with our vendors in our domains or global service providers and global vendors domain. And one of the things that we felt hardship during the interoperability test was that, as you mentioned, I think ONF and OIF, they're both doing very well in defining the common attributes of the APIs. But still, when we try to test over each vendor's or each service provider's domain, there are some more details for the common attributes are needed for ONF's API description. And also, I think it's a vendor's own advantage on making their own devices, but still there are, I think there's a hardship on each vendor's devices to completely follow the guides that ONF and OIFs are given to the vendors. So I think one of the things that we are asking ONF and OIF members to follow up is to provide us with some more details, views that every vendors or service providers can follow up easily to make and build their own service and try to follow the guidelines given by ONFs and OIFs. It will be very helpful for us because in managing our own domains and also trying to setting up lab or really POC environments between other global service providers.
Thank you for your comments.
Can I add to that? I think he brought up an interesting point. We found a similar situation as well. We test multiple data center switch products that are coming from the different vendors, and they all claim that they support OpenFlow a certain version. And what we found out that it's not all the same. Some does better than the other. And so what we have done, we end up creating the automated tool, the validation tool, that integrates ONOS as the kind of validation platform to run the OpenFlow protocol, such that we can validate different switches. I think we are willing to put that as part of the ONOS community, But as what he brought up, I think we do need more active participation from different angle as well, more such as the hardware vendors, right, and providing the standard-based or the open flow-based in particular products, and that's gonna help the overall community that uses ONOS, or it could be ODL in some cases, it's much easier to adapt that solution in the service providers side.
Thank you. I think there's 3 minutes and 30 seconds remaining on the time. I have one more question, but if there's any pressing question from the audience, I want to prioritize your question over mine. Okay, then let's go to the question number 4, and this is a question A and B. A for the vendors, B for service providers. For the vendors, let's start with the vendors. What would drive higher level of contributions to ONF by your company? So this is changing the thing. How can you help the community and ONF projects do more? So maybe we'll start with Huawei and then go to Samsung.
Right. So for this question, I think the answer is simple. Money talks. Right?
Money
what
talks.
it drives, it brings value, and I said brings value is bilateral. Basically, brings value to Huawei, brings value to the community, and create a bigger cake for everybody to share and address use cases by for our customer. That will certainly make Huawei be contributing more and believing more into the value of open source.
So you're challenging the service provider community to show paths to monetization.
Not just monetization, but also propose like challenging use cases that get feed to open source community, and we work together, figure out solutions, and have common platform, and also bring this integrate this into commercial products.
Very good. Samsung, do you add?
Oh yeah, I mean, we certainly like to see the increased level of deployment, right? Going from the lab trial to the actual deployment. I think that is going to help the overall involvement from the vendor side to the open source community. And also, I think it's many of the companies, I think, so they're struggling to find out what the right business model is going to be, right? People, initially, people start contributing or, adapting to the open source just because it is a new technology and they can get things started quickly. But at some point, there needs to be a business model established around it. Especially, we are working for a company that looks for profit, right? And I don't think many companies actually figured this one out well, and that probably includes us, right? So, it may not be a community issue. Certainly, there are some community can help with the overall situation, but it could also be every participant, in our case, the vendor side, they also need to come up with the right business model to move this forward.
So I think the same for Huawei, right? As we evaluate the open source projects, one of the most common questions asked is, are any of our customers interested in this project, in this work, right?
Good. Okay. Sorry, you had to add something? No. The time is, I think we have got last minute or two, so we'll get SKT to go and then Katie. So the second part of the question is, what are the technical or market or cultural hurdles you see which is slowing down your adoption of SDN and NFV and especially of open source SDN and NFV? And what are the challenges? How are you planning to overcome these challenges?
So, like I said, we are already trying it hard, and we are evaluating the technology and trying to adopt it where it makes sense. I think there are few challenges. One is that the reliability and resilience and high availability, some kind of guarantee that this thing doesn't break the existing network. Okay, so that, and how to design the migration plan, and how to design the architecture, and how to get comfortable that all of these new components are safe to use, right? So I think that is very first, a very important thing. The second thing is, and related to that, so if it comes from a major vendor like Samsung or Huawei or Ericsson or Nokia, it might be much easier for them to try them out and consume, rather than it's just open source, without anyone backing behind it. So that's the second thing. I think the third thing, I mean, it can go on and on. Then everything is a matter of, I mean, investment versus what is the return on that particular, I mean, approach versus the other. So there are lots of these questions that will be asked, and these are all very fair to, I mean, debate about those. But once we have much more mature technological components, then it becomes easier debate, right? Otherwise, it becomes much more difficult.
You have the last word.
Yeah. When I start this SDN and NFV approach, it was difficult for me to persuade inside operators and inside decision makers. And now, after I'm launching some commercial services, I feel difficulty in making ecosystems with not only with these big vendors, but also small and medium vendors for virtual functions and virtual solutions. So it is very important to make an ecosystem. And finally, and it is not only for operators issues, but for vendors issues, I think we need more and more experts in this area. So it is a request for those audiences, please participate this open source community, and we can make a new world and new flexible and agile infra.
Thank you very much.